A warmer brotherly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. Someone finally hit me up on my offer and sent in a Twitter/X question, so yay, verily. We will address that here in segment number 1, and we've seen a few portal moves over the last 48 or so hours. We'll give you a recap of that, and then we'll be joined in segment number 2 by Rob Donaldson. He does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. We'll take a look at some of the mid-major teams that he has his eye on, some of the just intriguing offseason moves that we've seen in general, and some teams are catching his fancy. So we've got ourselves a great podcast today. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_D1. Keep in mind, letters VM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Otherwise, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And everything today is powered by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost.bet, they're making sure that bettors are able to access the funds that they so desire and that they so love every single day of every single week. Over at EdgeBoost.bet, you're able to utilize these funds and get cashback rewards while you do so as well. And if you go to EdgeBoost.bet, please utilize that promo code of Greg, GREG. That'll give you $1 for $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's get into the Twitter/X question that we've got. That would be from Paulo Sanchez at Paulo_SANC14087 on the old Twitter/X. He was asking about, other than with a coaching change, is there a way to know that a team is changing up their playing style? Do you have to just sort of wait and see for when the season starts? Like, for example, last year with Cal Poly. Now, Cal Poly, that was because of a coaching change. Mike DeGeorge, that is always very, very paramount with him going on over from the D2 ranks to D1 ranks, and that is always something that you want to look at. That is going to be the biggest thing. But if you're looking at teams that maybe have, shall we say, a returning coach, the biggest thing is what they're bringing in via the transfer portal. Like with the Wisconsin Badgers, they went a little bit more with guys that are able to pop it from three-point range and were a little bit more up-tempo, like bringing in John Tanji, who had been at Missouri from the previous season. That was a little bit of a tip that, hey, maybe they're going to be going in a bit of a different direction. Even with Cameron Hunter, even though he didn't really play last season, he was coming on over from Central Arkansas. A little bit more of an up-tempo system, and you did see with the Wisconsin Badgers, they weren't as much of a snail's pace team. They decided to pick it up just a skoge, and I do think that those are some of the big things they're able to take a look at, just the roster construction in general. Now, some of these are just very hodgepodge. It's just based on the style that they've got, and you can look at a guy in season number 2 and think, all right, he's going to get back to his roots a little bit more in year number 2. Like Graham McCaslin over at Texas Tech, for example, I think is going to be very interesting because when he was over at North Texas, team was one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. Has been speeding it up a little bit more at Texas Tech. Does he decide, hey, we're going to slow it down a little bit more, get back to my roots from North Texas? I think that is always something that you want to be mindful of, and those are the biggest things. So, like, obviously, the coaching changes, those are the biggest things, but just looking at these rosters themselves, looking at the kind of guys that are going to be brought in via freshman recruitment, via as well the transfer portal, I think that could tell you if we're going to be seeing a little bit of shift, and we did see a few teams decide to shift around their rosters over the last few days with some transfer portal pickups. So, but if we do dive in there and look at what we've all gotten here over the last, we're going to call it about 48 or so hours with regards to these moves. You've got Yotanan Levy. He was over at UW Green Bay last season. He only played in 13 games because he was actually from the country of Turkey. 6'8" combo player, 8 points, 6 boards, 2.5 assists per contest. Able to pop it from 3, but not necessarily the world's greatest 3-point shooter. He has decided that he is going to be becoming a wave of Pepperdine. Relatively solid ad for Pepperdine. He's going to be able to give them some good versatility. And for Pepperdine, I will say that it does feel like things are getting on track for them. They made a coaching change last season. Took them a little bit of time to be able to find their sea legs as they bring in a guy in Dave Schilling who was over on the East Coast and brought a little bit of that flair last season, but I do think that here in season number 2, things might be able to take off a little bit more for Pepperdine, and a lot of these, shall we say, lesser WCC schools have really done a nice job of being able to address the issues that they've had in the transfer portal as well. You bring in Levy, if you're Pepperdine, Mike Saunders is going to be coming on over from McNeese. He's a pretty high upside guy. I do think that as well, Stefan Sisic, who comes on over from Tulane as a 7-footer, is going to be able to give them a bit of something down low. So I do like the way that they've been able to revamp this roster. UTSA, meet for the Roadrunners. They get a little bit of an addition, as well as they have decided to bring in McCabe Rich. He last season was over at Kansas State, and I mean, he saw some solid minutes. He was limited to 13 games, but 5.9 points, a little bit over 2 boards per contest. Guy that I think could be able to fit in right away with a UTSA team that under Austin Clonch are going to be looking to play very up-tempo. They're going to be looking to generate a lot of turnovers, and this is going to be a team that is very much reliant upon three-point shooting. For Rich, he had 6'7", actually did shoot a few threes last season, and in the very, very small sample size of threes they did shoot, he shot 57.1%. Now, that was a sample size of 7 threes, but I mean, he does show the ability to be able to pop it a little bit from three-point range. I think that there is going to be a bit of upside here with him, so I thought that was a good pickup for UTSA. A bunch that is very much going to be built around the backcourt once again this season. You've got Scotty Ibubi. He was over at Wyoming last season. 5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game as a 6'10" big man. He has decided that he is going to be going to NC State. Now, if he's seeing the floor for NC State, things have went horribly wrong for NC State. We are going to call it what it is. This is a move where they are going to be adding him for a little bit of depth, maybe be like a coach on the bench, something like that, a guy to be able to fill out the roster. Heck, he might just be a walk-on at this point, but that said, for NC State, it is another cog for this team, and for NC State, they really have done a nice job of being able to bring in guys, as Jerry Dang, who comes on over from Florida State, was going through the NBA draft process, got the likes of Allen Breed, Kadir Copeland, going on over from McNeese to NC State. Terrence Arsenault is a guy that I think is really going to be able to take off from Houston. Trey Hallman comes on over from Michigan State. And then you do have size with Van Allen Lubin coming in. You've got Darion Williams. I just look up and down the boulevard, and yeah, this is going to be an NC State team that is going to be a little bit undersized. So Abubi might be able to see a few minutes, but I mean, he's just really the cherry on top to what I think has been an absolutely amazing offseason here for NC State. I mean, it's pretty incredible what we're going to be seeing with regards to J.J. Taylor this season as he goes to Northern Illinois. He's going to be the big fish in a small pond last season. He was over at Central Florida at 6'8". He was able to give the team 4.5 points, right around about 2.2 rebounds per contest. I do think that with Mr. J.J. Taylor, he's going to be able to come in and be able to give this team a nice little bit of a shot in the arm. Grew about 32.5% three-point shooter. Didn't necessarily pop a lot from three-point range, but a guy that is able to square up, shoot it from three-point range, and I do think that he presents some upside for a Northern Illinois team that it's in a MAC where it just feels like a lot of these teams have not utilized the transfer portal this offseason. Like, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just the way that I viewed things, but the MAC has really fallen off in general. Northern Illinois has been one of the more, shall you say, rough college basketball teams out there over the last few seasons, so this Illinois bunch, they just need to be able to get a little bit of a shot in the arm. They were able to bring in Jayo Atika in the offseason as well, a really good three-point shooter, so I think that that's going to be able to help them out too. Isaiah Washington, who comes in after just not seeing the floor over at UNC Greensboro, presents a little bit of upside in that backcourt as well, so I do think that Northern Illinois has some nice pieces to be able to ascend. I certainly don't think that they're going to be at the top of the conference, but you know what? Positivity that is happening. And you've got Ja'Kavion Buckley, who was over at Southeast Louisiana last season, a rock-solid player, 14.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4 assists, 1.8 steals per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to New Orleans. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Master P has been getting involved with New Orleans. I absolutely love to be able to see that, and for this New Orleans bunch, I do think that there's some upside here after they were involved in some scandal towards the back half of the season last year. It is a New Orleans team that was a little bit, shall we say, muted with regards to the transfer portal up until now, but Churchill Abbas coming on over from Wake Forest at 6'9". He's going to be able to give you a bit of something, and you've got Colton Benson, a really nice three-point shooter from Texas State as well. So I do think that for New Orleans, they are starting to be able to get things online, and this is a really nice add. He's going to be able to elevate this offense big time, and you've got EJ Neal heading on over to USC. He was over at Sacramento State last season, 8 points, 3 boards. He is going to be lost in the shuffle over at USC. USC, I think, just had one more body that they needed, and, well, they were able to get that body. So, you know what? Congratulations to USC. EJ Neal, have fun playing like 2 minutes a game because he is going to be in mop-up duty and pretty much nothing else, because when you've got Roddy Rice, when you've got Ryan Cornish, when you've got these guys in general, they're able to light it up. Chad Baker-Mazara, there's just not going to be too much of a place for him, but you know what? He is going to be over at USC. I'm sure that he's going to be able to get a little bit of money for his troubles, so yay verily there, and yay verily for the fact that you've got Western Michigan getting a big-time ad as well. How about a good day for the MAC? Florida International transfer Jaden Brewer heading out over there, 14.5 points, 5 boards, a little bit over a steal per contest, and for Brewer. He was a do-it-all guy over at Florida National last season, not a guy that's going to light it up from three. And Western Michigan was relatively pathetic from three-point range. They were a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. It doesn't look like that's going to be going too far northward, but you know what? For Western Michigan, they do get a nice primary ball handler. This is going to be able to help them out because they do lose a lot of the backcourt from a season ago where they were a team that actually did a relatively solid job on the glass as well, but they're also going to be bringing in Justice Williams. He was a guy that missed last season over at Robert Morris, but he's able to handle as well, playing him off the ball and probably putting Mr. Brewer in more of that point guard role. I think is going to serve Western Michigan very well. So that's what we all saw in college basketball over the last 48 or so hours with regards to transfer moves. And coming up next, how about if we do chat with our good friend Rob Donaldson right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. Does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets over on youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. Professional sports bettor that does such a great job on both the baseball and the college basketball front. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at RobDFB. And Rob, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Greg. Thank you for having me on. And, you know, the college basketball season might be taking a little bit of a backseat in terms of the actual game action, but we still got transfer portal news. We've got coaches and teams being built. And yeah, I'm excited to jump into it with you.
Absolutely. And Rob, how about if we do talk about the mid-majors, because you're out there in the great state of Iowa, and that's a hotbed for the Missouri Valley Conference, which I think is one of the most interesting conferences in the country coming into this year, because with Drake, obviously a changing of the guard with Eric Henderson coming in, but I feel like they've made the best of a bad situation. I feel like with just these teams in the Valley, you've got a lot of teams that are bringing back a ton, like in Northern Iowa, for example, and I think that this is going to be a very stacked mid-major conference.
Yeah, obviously it's not the same as it was when they had Creighton, Wichita State, and Loyola Chicago running amok with everybody else in between. You had Drake, Northern Iowa back then as well, but man, this is still a very fun conference with a lot of great teams top to bottom, and heck, even one of the teams that kind of got, I guess, raided in the portal this offseason was Valpo. And, you know, that was a team that at the beginning of last season had no expectations, but entered the MVC tournament, had a really great run. Turned out that they had a lot of great next level type of talent as well because other programs pillaged them. And I think that just kind of speaks to where this league actually is. This is quality basketball, and it really does pay when these teams are going up against maybe some other mid-majors.
Yep, it certainly does. And when it comes to this mid-major, I just have been so intrigued by what we've been seeing out of the Missouri Valley Conference and the way that they've been able to do a nice job of just keeping their own as well, because we see some of these mid-major conferences, they're unable to keep their guys in-house. And while maybe you don't have the world's most extravagant portal hauls with some of these schools, the fact that they are bringing back theirs and they have that chemistry from year to year, I think is just massive.
Oh, 100%. This is actually one of the leagues that has like the most continuity. I think a lot of it comes down to the attraction level of the next level schools. And from when you're going from the MVC or maybe the Mountain West or the A10, I think you're going to have a lot more continuity in those leagues because the high majors isn't a giant step up. Sure, you might have, you know, better payday opportunities, but a lot of these guys are program built dudes, maybe even transferred up from a lower level mid-major. And for that reason, you have year to year guys who are building within these programs. It's almost one of those kind of unique leagues now in college sports where we don't really see that anymore.
No, we really don't. And it's so much fun to be able to take a look at this sort of a conference and just knowing that we've got guys that are coming back from year to year that have some experience and that have been with this coaching staff as well. And it allows a little bit more, shall we say, intimacy with regards to fans of like Bradley, of Northern Iowa, and teams like this. And when it comes to the Missouri Valley, is there a team or two that really has caught your attention as to having a good offseason, whether that be what they brought in or what they're keeping?
Well, you know, when you look at Illinois State, that was a team that going into last season, it was like a real big question mark because Illinois State used to be one of the teams that actually was kind of a front runner not too long ago. Within the past decade, they were one of the top teams in this conference. And, you know, they just could never really get over the hump. once the actual conference tournament came into fold, it kind of went to the more notable name brands like a Northern Iowa or a Drake or a Loyola Chicago in terms of getting the automatic bid. But here in year two, under kind of a new regime change, a new looking team that really does have more of that gunslinger offensive approach, I'm actually really intrigued to see how they do under Ryan Peden. I feel like they're bringing back enough talent to actually do something really interesting within this conference, especially with so many coaching changes on the top side of this league as well. And if you do want to take maybe a sort of Bradley-esque sort of jump at one of these teams that from this past season, I think Illinois State is going to be one of those teams that really surprises some people.
Yep, I think so as well. I really love what Illinois State has coming back, and I think that they are going to be in for a tremendous year. It's Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Soups, and I do think that the entire league is going to be relatively stacked this season because I mentioned Northern Iowa, what they've all got coming back, the fact that you bring back a guy like a Leon Baum. They had a lot of their more ancillary guys coming back from a season ago as well. They're going to be a fun one to be able to take a look at, but I do think that Bradley is also just such an intriguing team because we've almost seen a little bit of an identity shift to them where they were one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball last year. Recognize that they're going to be losing quite a few guys from a season ago, but I think that they're very much a team to be taking a look at, and one that I think is going to go back a little bit more to those roots prior to a season ago in being very stout on the glass.
Yeah, and Bradley's one of those teams that, before last season never really had like the crazy level, star talent approach. They were always a really balanced team or even kind of leaning into like that Virginia style of really intense defense, which we just saw Drake kind of adopt this past season, given the fact that Ben McCollum was coming up from D2, just kind of wanting to put a competitive roster on the floor, and man, did he ever. And for that reason, I actually do, to your point, kind of see Bradley almost maybe not exceeding last year's results, which were really fantastic, even with missing the NCAA tournament, which was kind of the end goal. And for that, I really do buy into them. Again, just kind of being near that top, along with Northern Iowa. And I think a lot of teams are question marks after that. And because of the field maybe shrinking down a peg, maybe that actually does give Bradley a better chance to actually make it to that automatic bid.
Yep, I think that it's going to be a lot of fun to take a look at Bradley and what they're going to be supplying this year. As joining me on the show, we do have our good friend Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups. And Rob, I know that obviously the Missouri Valley Conference is going to be a fun conference to be taking a look at in general, but I think that this one is good as well. Conference USA had some really good teams in there last year. Obviously, Liberty was able to get that at-large bid, and they were able to make the NCAA tournament, but that's another one that I think is so much fun, in which we've got a little bit of a new look with Delaware joining. I think it might be a little bit rough for them in year number one, but all in all, I just take a look at the way that things have been built out there in Conference USA, and despite the fact that they lost so many teams a few seasons ago from them going to the American Conference, I feel like this conference in general has done a great job of piecemealing things together and keeping just a good basketball pedigree.
Yeah, and this is one of those conferences that I was a little bit afraid would kind of really fade back in terms of their talent because, there's so many kind of predominant teams in this league. When you look at a Middle Tennessee State, who's kind of in, I guess, the same region there, but Middle Tennessee State's always been a powerhouse, Louisiana Tech, New Mexico State, and even Liberty right there. But when you are looking at the CUSA, this was a league that last year I kind of wanted to know where that they were going to be in terms of the hierarchy of these mid-majors, because obviously Liberty turned over a lot of talent when they lost Darius McGee, and that was kind of the team that every single year would make it or get that automatic bid for the most part out of this league. And then, yes, last year they go ahead and do it again. And now it's a question mark to me still of how good or how formidable the kind of the bottom half of this league can be, as well as sort of that middle area. I do feel like there's still some teams with enough culture and enough national respect to really garner that talent. But I am kind of worried that this could almost be like the OVC light, where the OVC was so prominent for such a long time, and then it kind of got sucked away by other mid-majors as the years kind of progressed.
Yep, I do agree with you. And for the OVC, by the way, I know that you've looked at a few teams out there, and I know you were liking Southern Indiana when you came on the podcast a few weeks ago. That is one conference where I do feel like they've actually rebuilt a little bit better. Lindenwood looks like they might not quite be as sorry as they have been over the last few years as well. I'm excited about Southeast Missouri State, and I do think that that's one of the mid-majors that, after they were hurt so much it feels like they're finally back up on the come up.
I 100% agree. When you even look at Tennessee State and the talent that they've been able to acquire through the portal over the last couple of years, that's a program that's a little bit back on the map. Little Rock is right there too. Southern Indiana is finally entering sort of that eligibility territory after, going through the waves of transferring from D2. Still a couple years to go for them to actually be able to make the NCAA tournament with an auto bid, but they're starting to actually build the talent that is respectable enough of a Division I mid-major. And again, you mentioned it, SEMO, SIUE. You have some teams that are finally starting to replace sort of that Moorhead State hierarchy that we saw for so long with Preston Spradlin. And, I really do think that that's going to be ultimately what it comes down to, because there are a ton of leagues out there. The WCC is a little bit of an outlier because they have kind of two of those teams, but most conferences are in that mid-major tier have one team that you can sort of highlight as, okay, this team runs it for the most part, and then maybe some other teams kind of fill in behind it to make it more formidable. But the OVC, once they started kind of hemorrhaging these teams, didn't really have that outside of Moorhead State, and it finally feels like they are starting to get back on track, to your point.
Yep, no question about it. And I think that it's going to be a lot of fun to take a look at the OVC this season, as, with Moorhead State, it looks like they're going to be able to have a rock solid year as well, but now a little bit more up and down the boulevard. I do think that for Tennessee Tech, it might be a little bit rough for them, but overall these schools have been able to do a nice job of mixing and matching, and that has been an interesting dynamic without having Belmont along with Murray State in the fold as well. As joining me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and we've taken a look at a few major conferences. Is there another one or two that you take a look at and there might be either a sneaky team or two in there, or just in general, they might be a little bit stronger than what a lot of people are anticipating?
Well, I look at the A10 and I feel like every single year this league just kind of, I don't know, just doesn't get the enough credit, because everybody kind of sees whether or not Dayton is up or down and then makes their determination on whether or not the league is actually going to be good. Like, heck, VCU had an amazing season last year, and I will say a lot of people weren't necessarily as high on them as sort of they actually played out on in reality. And on top of that, I would say even the NCAA tournament, in terms of their seeding, wasn't fair enough to them, giving them an 11 seed despite having an amazing year. And when you look at George Mason, when you look at Dayton, VCU, even after Ryan Odom, Loyola Chicago, that's actually starting to get back to form, and St. Joe's, that just kind of feels like a talent factory out there in Philadelphia, where, yeah, maybe they could stand for a little bit of a better coach in terms of the X's and O's and the in-game execution. Potentially, I would leave that up to the listeners, but there's no doubting the amount of talent that they can actually bring in, even with guys transferring out, even with guys going pro or getting lost in graduation. And when you're talking about the other quote-unquote teams being St. Louis, St. Bonaventure, Duquesne, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. Well, I guess Massachusetts is heading out too, but there's a lot of teams on that sort of that back end of the A10 that have had a lot of historic success. I mean, you look at Davidson, they're in the mix there too, and every single year, I feel like this is one of those leagues like the MVC that acquires a lot of talent and doesn't necessarily hemorrhage too much talent on its own right. And for that reason, I think the A10 year in and year out is going to be one of those just really competitive leagues.
Absolutely, and a man that is so competitive in terms of always trying to be able to get you to the window and does an amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love. That'd be you, Rob, and so glad that you mentioned those names, because UMass don't think that they're going to be missed too much by the Atlantic 10, but you'd be missed on this podcast, my friend, because you do such a great job being able to break down this great game of basketball. Love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it's always a blast talking hoops when we're, talking about actual games. And, for those who are wanting to follow my picks once college basketball season comes into fold, or follow my day-to-day bets as well, you can do so on Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate me on, man.
It is always great to be able to get our good friend and Rob aboard. He does such an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. Such a great job on the baseball front this time of year as well, and every single time he joins, we learn such great insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_. _81. Keep in mind, Larry's the they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'll be coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. Big thanks once again to our good friend Ryan McIntyre for joining me in these last 2 segments. And I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Your wealth makes you an irresistible target to online criminals. According to Saltus Wealth, 41% of high net worth individuals report having been victims of financial crime. Unfortunately, off-the-shelf digital security solutions aren't robust enough to protect high-profile individuals like you. So what can you do? Rely on Concierge Digital Security from Reputation Defender. Concierge Digital Security is not just another app to install, it's a team of experts working in the background to protect you and your family. Behind the scenes, Reputation Defender bundles a suite of best-in-class security solutions, covering virtually every aspect of your digital life, from digital identity to online privacy, identity fraud, insurance, and home device protection. Your concierge helps manage all of these for you. Visit reputationdefender.com/success to learn more, or schedule your private consultation. That's reputationdefender.com/success.